Welcome into the JP and Hack Show, part of the Field of 12 Media Network. This is Season 1, Episode 17, presented by our partners over at Bet River Sportsbook. I'm Joshua Perry, of course, joined by my guy Christian Hackenberg. We give you the best analysis of anything Big Ten that you can find anywhere.
That's us.
So we don't have any games imminently. That's pretty obvious. So we're going to kind of make this a topical show. It should be fun. We're going to recap the Heisman. We're going to go over some thoughts about name, image, and likeness, the transfer portal, talk about some coaching news. And then the third segment, we will do just a little bit on bowl games, but recapping the Heisman, first and foremost, I think it's really impressive for the Big Ten Conference to have had two guys there in New York as finalists. Obviously, Aiden Hutchinson had himself a hell of a year. He was terrorizing quarterbacks. It seemed like every single game, and he played with relentless effort. You flip it over to CJ Stroud, coming off of the heels of Dwayne Haskins and Justin Fields. He stepped in, took his criticism, and just continued to get better throughout the season. But as the results had it, Bryce Young won the award, the quarterback for Alabama, and he has been phenomenal truly this year. Has done a really good job. And the way that the top five ended up going, it was Bryce Young, number one, Aiden Hutchinson, number two, Kenny Pickett, the quarterback for Pitt, was number three. CJ Stroud was number four in votes. And then Will Anderson, the linebacker defensive end for Alabama, was five. The thing that stood out to me, and you tell me if you feel the same way or not, is the margin between first and second, but also specifically the margin between the quarterbacks was outrageous to me. And I understand that Bryce Young has been impressive. He had that drive against Auburn, which was very good. He made his statement against Georgia in the SEC championship. But when you look at the body of work throughout the season from both Kenny Pickett and CJ Stroud, I don't think it was that clear cut.
I completely agree with you. The other thing that I think is really interesting is how you have two defensive guys finishing in the top five. I can't think of a time since I've been alive where that's happened.
No.
But I think this year was really interesting too. And we kind of talked about this before, and I've talked about this on the other podcast. There just wasn't as definitive of a Heisman winner early in this, or even in the middle of the season.
Mm-hmm.
It really all kind of came down to the end. And I think when you are Bryce Young and you were in the conversation for the entirety pretty much of the year, and then being able to have your Heisman moments the last two games of the year, I think that really stuck out, especially for the voters. As a kid who really never dipped, never had a big valley within his performances throughout the year. And then your ability to go out in the Auburn game, put together a performance like that, really gutsy, and then follow that up with beating Georgia, who just seemed like impenetrable defensively, and putting up some really good numbers against them. So I think for him, he kind of benefited from having the what have you done for me lately? And that limelight more recent than the other guys. But I completely agree with you. I mean, the body of work that Kenny Pickett put together, unfortunately, I think his team just wasn't good enough.
Wasn't as high profile.
It wasn't as high profile. The ACC didn't have the attention it had. Nope. Had North Carolina lived up to expectations and Clemson lived up to expectations, and he had done what he did, I think maybe that's a different angle. And then for CJ, you and I talked about, I think CJ it was a really good year for him. And his Heisman moment kind of happened.
It was too early.
Three quarters of the way through the season, a little too early.
Yeah.
And not to take anything away from it, but I just think it was I think it was ultimately came down to that. What have you done for me lately? And Bryce Young had the ability to throw the last shot up, and he capitalized on it. And I think that's where the splash came from.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I do think we're living in a world right now where the Heisman moments truly do matter. You mentioned Bryce Young, his two performances, and it was really a ton of recency bias with the Auburn game, because everybody remembered the drive toward the end of the game. But if you look at that game as a whole, he threw for under 300 yards. He was about 49% completion. Like, it wasn't extremely impressive. And in the same week, CJ Stroud threw for nearly 400 yards and a couple of touchdowns, no picks, but his team lost the game. And when they lost the game, he lost his ability to go out there on probably what would have been a similar game in terms of hype in a Big Ten championship to prove why he was that guy. The reason why Bryce Young was able to separate, he's playing the same weekend as Kenny Pickett for championship weekend, but you said it. Nobody's looking at the ACC. Like, I don't know how many people watched that game. I am sure it wasn't very many. I watched Alabama and Georgia play that Saturday, and that was the first time I really got to watch either one of those teams play all year outside of the coaches' tape. And there were just a ton of eyeballs. And so he was in the right moment at the right time, and he put together a phenomenal final game to cap off a really good season.
Yeah, I agree. And what's going to be fun is watching him and CJ duke it out now for, at least one more year and maybe two, depending on, what they all decide and how things shake out, but probably at least one more year. So
did you watch the ceremony?
I didn't get a chance to watch a bunch of it, but
so I was I caught a rerun of it because I was running the streets Saturday night. But I think just generally, I really appreciate that ceremony having that primetime spotlight, because you get to see how remarkable each of these kids are, and you get to hear about all of their stories and what makes them tick. You hear from their coaches, you hear from their families. I think it's really impressive. CJ Stroud has impressed me a number of times this year, just following him as closely as I have, as a young quarterback who always seems to have the poise, not necessarily always says the right things, but always comes to play and will stand out in front of the media regardless. Aiden Hutchinson was the emotional leader, the heart and soul of that Michigan team, and a big reason why they were able to exceed expectations. And so to hear his mother and father talk about him and his mentality in the offseason was awesome. But Bryce Young, and I had heard him in a radio interview a couple of weeks ago, he is an extremely impressive person. And hearing from his mother and father, you can tell that he was raised in an environment where they had high standards for him. And then listening to the way that he speaks and the way he carries himself, I think was awesome. And so, like I said at the beginning of that little deal, it is so cool to see players in that environment where they're buttoned up and they're dressed up, but they're around their family, and it's a celebration of their accolades, because you get to see the personalities, kind of what's behind the helmet. And it seems year after year that it's just a really impressive group of guys we get to watch.
You see a bunch of great representations of college football. And I feel like, to your point, oftentimes fans, media, a lot of people get caught up in the helmet and the shoulder pads as opposed to what makes those kids tick. And I'm sure we're going to get into it now, but specifically with the business mentality that's taking over college sports, I feel like moments like that are much more important, because, to your point, a lot of these kids, shoot, those kids aren't even 21 yet. Like, they can't even go to a dang bar and order a beer.
No, I think Aiden might be, in Kenny. But the other two guys up there.
The other two guys were the young guys, and it's just
kids.
impressive to see their development, and also highlight that, because I think that's a huge part of the college game, and seeing how fast these kids have to grow up now and realize the amount of responsibility that they carry on a day-to-day basis, not only from a football perspective, but much bigger than that. It's something that I think is good to highlight for the fans out there, and even sometimes for the media, to remind them that you guys are dealing with kids, and to see how impressive they are and how they overcome mistakes and circumstances and what makes them tick. That's a great point, Josh. I'm happy you brought that to light, because that's something that I think the average person would just flash by and overlook, but that's a great point.
Yeah, I felt like it's something that we both experienced, and just getting to know you over the season. Like, you're a remarkable person. You have you're very candid. You have a good presence in delivery, and I'm not exactly sure how many people would have known that from your career at Penn State, because you're one of many, and you also have a shield on your face. And so for these guys, it's a wonderful opportunity that definitely segues right into our Big Thoughts segment, because these guys now, having been on that spotlight and that stage, probably put themselves in position, Bryce Young and CJ specifically as the young guys in that group, to get a little bit of money. Like, if I am a brand right now and I'm looking at, okay, who's going to be the next front guy? Like, who are the college guys I'm going after? Those two guys are at the top of my list, not just because they're Heisman Trophy caliber players, but because they're impressive young people. Before we continue on with the show, if you're looking for ways to skip the trip to the post office and dodge all that hectic holiday shopping traffic, why not save time and money with Stamps.com? Stamps.com lets you compare rates, print labels, and access exclusive discounts on UPS and USPS services all year long. It just makes sense, especially if your business sends more mail and packages during the holidays. Whether you're selling online or running an office or side hustle, Stamps.com can save you so much time, money, and stress during the holidays. How? By allowing you to access all the post office and UPS shipping services you need without taking the trip and get discounts you can't find anywhere else, like up to 40% off of USPS rates and 76% off of UPS. In 2021, if you're still going to the post office instead of using Stamps.com, it's like taking the stairs instead of the elevator. Just going up a couple floors? Sure, take the stairs. Walking up 30 flights a day? You could use a break, and if you spend more than a few minutes a week dealing with mail and shipping, Stamps.com is a lifesaver. You'll save so much time and money, you'll wonder why you didn't start sooner. So join Stamps.com now and save money and time this holiday season. And sign up with promo code JPHack for a special holiday offer that includes a 4-week trial, free postage, and a digital scale. No long-term commitments or contracts. Just go to Stamps.com, click the microphone in the top of the page, and enter code JPHack. Let me tell you about our sponsors over at BetRivers Sportsbook. If you haven't signed up yet, BetRivers is offering a $250 match bonus for your first deposit. But what sets them apart from everyone else is that they require just one playthrough to turn that bonus into cash money. With their new Rush Pay instant approval, withdrawals are not only fast, they are safe, secure, and reliable. Go to betrivers.com today or download the BetRivers iOS app. Must be 21 years or older. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. And now a quick message from our sponsors over at BetterHelp. Is there something that is preventing you from achieving your goals or interfering with your happiness? If there is, let me tell you about BetterHelp, professional help done securely online. Check out betterhelp.com/JPHack. BetterHelp will assess your individual needs and match you with your own licensed professional therapist to allow you to connect in a safe and private online environment. It's so convenient you can start communicating in less than 48 hours. BetterHelp is not a crisis line. It's an avenue to accessing professional therapy without having to sit in an uncomfortable waiting room. BetterHelp has licensed professionals who specialize in depression, stress, anxiety, as well as relationship and grief counseling. You can message your counselor at any time and get timely, thoughtful responses. Plus, you can schedule weekly video or phone sessions. Find the particular expertise you need online. Don't limit yourself to counselors located near you, and do it in a manner that is more affordable than traditional offline counseling. Financial aid is available. So many people have been using BetterHelp that they are recruiting additional counselors in all 50 states. I want you to start living a happier life today. As a listener, you'll get 10% off your first month by visiting betterhelp.com/JPHack. Join over the 1 million people who have taken charge of their mental health. Again, that's BetterHelp, HELP.com/JPHack today.
And that's the funny thing is when you look at the NIL and you read a lot of the literature and regulations that went into forming it, that's what it is. It's purely marketable, not necessarily for what they do on the field. Now, that's not to say that what they do on the field doesn't help their marketability, right, but they can't be specifically paid on what they do on the field. You can't be paid for touchdowns. You can't be paid for commitments. You can't be paid for playing time. So to your point, the better you carry yourself and the more marketable from a branding, big business, it comes down to risk management and risk analysis. Like, are you going to be a risk to my brand who's going to partner with you? And like we said, these kids are 18, 19, 20 years old getting these types of things. So that comes with a lot of responsibility. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see how this all shakes out, because you have two guys who are young guys who are Heisman candidates and who obviously show a great deal of marketability in terms of their play, but also the type of people they are. And then you have some of these deals getting thrown out there with Spencer Rattler and Quinn Ewers, who hasn't played a snap yet. And because of their marketability, you have a lot of people dumping money into this, but they're both gone now and they're transferring, and one's at South Carolina, the other one's at Texas. And it's going to be interesting to see how that shapes decision making moving forward.
I think this would be a good time to kind of dive into the Quinn Ewers case, right? Because he's a guy who called his own shot in leaving high school early to enroll at Ohio State. And it seems like that was at the time, it felt very transactional because there was the money motive behind it. And in hindsight, it absolutely was transactional because he realized what his playing prospects were going to be heading into next year and decided that he was going to call his own shot again, which I can appreciate, and transfer out of Ohio State. But now you're looking at a guy who has not thrown a pass in college, I should say. And he has money in the bank. He has multiple deals. He had local deals. He's had national deals. And it goes to this idea that you mentioned, that marketability and somebody's success on the field are not the same thing. He was a recruit that came into Ohio State with over 100,000 followers on his Instagram. He has a look that we will get into as well that is extremely unique. And so now you are evaluating not just when players are evaluating their situations and when brands are evaluating players, you're looking at, okay, if you're a player, what is a big brand in a spotlight, not necessarily a brand, but like a city, like what's a good market to be in that's going to have a spotlight? Can I play? Because that's obviously going to enhance. But also if you're a brand, like, okay, you want the quarterback probably because people are going to know his name, but like, does he really have to play if he's already got the built-in followers? Does he really have to play if he's already got the look? And now with him going to Texas, which is something that we should talk about, they've got a
different ball game.
They've got their boosters have put together a charitable organization to pay their offensive linemen for charitable appearances, is what they're saying. But basically $50,000 a head for the offensive line. And off of that alone, they got 2 blue chip commitments. This is the absolute Wild West of college football.
Yeah. And that's what's funny is it's almost like that gray area, right? Where it's not, hey, you're not paying for play, but in a way that definitely incentivizes things. And it's not only happening in Texas. There's a bunch of other groups. Oregon's doing it.
Yep.
Phil Knight's pretty much leading that group where they're trying to figure out ways to put together packages for athletes at the University of Oregon. So it's, to me, that's going to be really interesting. And specifically with Quinn, you had a kid who at the end of the day is playing at the high school football mecca, or one of them. Right. And at least the most recent one that's been there. Texas high school football is what it is. He absolutely lit it up at a major school that has put out multiple professional quarterbacks. And he had all of that going into Ohio State, which is within itself a very recognizable brand across the world. And within the state of Ohio, Columbus, I can't really name many other larger cities within that state. So you have a lot of things that go into that. But for him to go back home, the boosters, that old oil money down in Texas, as much of a decision as I think it was for him to be able to see that he's going to have the ability to get on the field, I think realistically speaking, with the way they kind of shuffled the deck at quarterback this year and the inconsistency they had at that position, he's got a great opportunity to step in if he takes advantage of it. Now having spring ball and some winter to get into it. Yep. And then training camp. But
he learned from Ryan Day for 6 months, which is impressive too. So
very impressive. So it's really unique the way he did it. But going back to the NIL, Texas, unlike a lot of other schools, if they can creatively continue to figure out ways to, I can't even say, it's almost like buy players in ways where they haven't been able to before. I think you're talking about getting them back. And that's what Texas always was, whether in the old days when it was truly buying players and dropping hay bales from planes with stacks of money tied in the middle of them.
Yep.
now they've allowed that to happen. And when you have a school like Texas with the money that goes into it from a booster standpoint, that gets scary. And I think it's weirdly enough for Texas, it could be program saving and program defining with them going into the SEC. And I think Quinn's gonna bear a lot of that on his shoulders for the next few years.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you this because it is a really unique situation. I think the Texas boosters are obviously invested. Businesses, I think, will act differently than boosters will because businesses have to make sense of their bottom line. Boosters have FU money that they'll just throw around. Like they don't care. Is there a way that stands out to you that would make sense to regulate this thing? Because the NCAA has been extremely hands-off. They feel like they can't do very much. They want Congress to get involved. Congress has a bunch of other stuff that they got to deal with right now. So this is probably not too high on their list of priorities. What would be the ideal way to regulate NIL so you can't have a situation where boosters are essentially promising prospects cash if they commit and end up enrolling?
Well, that's the weird thing is I feel like their solution was that they weren't going to be able to pay for play, right? But when you can now do gray area things like that, where you create a foundation and you're paying for appearances and things of that nature with the expectation that you may or may not play, the money's still coming in. Right. Quinn's a perfect example. He went to Ohio State. His check's still cleared. It wasn't dependent on Quinn throwing a pass at Ohio State. It was dependent on Quinn doing that. So I know that that's probably not right. And that's probably not the answer. But for me, if you're looking at a quick answer, any of these deals that come through within specifically, let's say, a booster world, right? I think it should be predicated on the kid playing snaps at the school. No performance, but it should be predicated on the kid actually taking snaps at that school, or at least finishing a year or two or three. Because like you said, these boosters just have money and they're going to throw it and they don't care. They're going to throw shit on the wall and see what sticks. Yep. So it's probably not the answer, because now you're going to run into a whole nother world of backdoor old school recruiting mentality. But at the same time, if you're going to open it up for a gray area, they're going to run wild in that gray area and ramp it. And like I said, it's going to become one of those things where they're just going to sign as many guys as they can who are high profile with the promise of getting money no matter what. And if 10 of them pan out, that could be completely program changing, especially if they're really good football players. So I feel like they really handcuff themselves with a lot of things. And to your point, I think the NCAA is in a really tough situation with it. They're trying to save face and
nobody likes them too. So, anything they do is.
It's hard, dude. And what's your perspective on it? Because I think that's going to be interesting too. I mean, it's like, what do you do? You're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. It's kind of a double-edged sword. If you're going to open up the floodgates, you better be prepared to drink out of a fire hose.
Right. I think what Texas is trying to put together, and this is going to be replicated at many places, I think that is absolutely outside of the nature of what they were trying to do here, because it's essentially pay for play. Like they put a dollar amount on what a guy would receive if he was a part of that program at a specific position. Like, that feels wrong to me. Now, to say that certain people can't get involved in certain ways, I feel like is really tough too. But that situation really stands out to me as buying commitments, as buying players. And I don't like it. I think that there is a way that the NCAA could aggregate information on NIL deals in a clearinghouse type of situation. I mean, they aggregate all kinds of information. They used to do it they do it with academics to make sure that people are eligible, and they count credits for numerous athletes. Like, they could figure this thing out. And basically what it would do is it would alert red flags. For example, a player who has never played a snap, who's a freshman at a program, who's making an exorbitant amount of money. Is that something that you can say is in line with what the industry average would be? And they can at least put a red flag to investigate if that was a pay for play situation. Quinn Ewers, again, like, you can just lean on his Instagram following and say, like, look, his followers might be worth that much money. I don't know what the answer is on that one, but just to say, like, there is And it's the same thing. Like, you had an agent when you played, and I currently have an agent. Like, they have information about deals that go on to make sure that I'm paid properly. Conversely, companies understand what my market value is for my services as well. And I think there's a way to understand that. There are going to be guys who are outliers. There's nothing wrong with that. But, I think there's a way to understand the nature of NIL as a kid doing endorsements, or NIL is like, all right, they probably paid this kid to come in.
Yeah, I think so too. But like I said, but I mean, what if everything clears, right? Like, what if every single Texas offensive lineman shows up to every single charitable thing, takes pictures, smiles, signs autographs? Like,
yeah, that's the tough part about it.
Clears out, it's like, so like I said, I think there's just too much gray area. And when it's
just the fact that they promise it coming in, though.
Yeah,
like,
I agree.
That's the part that just really is outside of what you would expect. And offensive linemen are not particularly marketable either.
No.
Like, I'm not exactly sure there are NFL offensive linemen that are making $50,000 in endorsements.
100%. There's definitely not.
No,
there's probably 5 of them.
And it's, as soon as Sark says it's a position of need, like, that's the point where you're like, all right, guys, like,
strategic marketing.
But we don't. I mean, we got some answers. We don't have all the answers. This will be something we continue to dive into, as well as the transfer portal. That is another topic, and that thing is filling up. And when you look at the Big Ten, specifically, obviously Quinn Ewers we talked about, but Adrian Martinez has jumped in the portal. Jack Plummer, who's Purdue's backup quarterback, who had played snaps this year and last year, and he's a solid player, is in the portal. And Zach Ennickstead, who is one of Minnesota's backup quarterbacks, jumped in there as well. How do you see this situation regulating itself? Because it's really unique to me, and I love that players have the freedom. And these are guys who have, except for Quinn, they've all played and they've paid their dues, and they're looking for a new opportunity, which I'm all on board with. But the amount of players who have entered the portal that probably aren't going to come out is staggering.
Yeah. So it's funny. So I still have some relationships with people who are coaching, who were GAs or even former teammates now at this point that have gotten into the world. And, now with me coaching high school football, it's crazy to see the thought process within buildings, and specifically surrounding this transfer portal and what's going on, because unfortunately the kids that are losing out the most are probably the seniors this year.
Right.
Because the transfer portal is so new. I think a lot of people get enamored with it. What I think that there's 2 different types of kids in the transfer portal. There's kids who have played, who have game tape, who have shown that they can help a team based upon their performance on Saturdays.
Right.
And that's where I feel the transfer portal does a great job in providing opportunities for those kids. There's other kids who have yet to play a snap. Mm-hmm. And now there's college coaches who are evaluating these kids and projecting them at, 19, 20 years old based upon practice film.
Right.
Or what they were in high school.
Right.
You don't know what's going on. So I feel like it presents a really unique challenge for coaches. And like I said, I think the kids that lose out the most are the seniors in high school right now. And the COVID year didn't help. And there's a whole bunch of other junk that goes into that. But the fact of the matter is it's going to definitely create some disruption in talent development at the high school level. And I think for probably 3 to 4 years, and then specifically within the transfer portal, as long as people keep going to it and dipping in and taking these kids over high school kids, it's gonna present some challenges. So I really think that when the transfer portal is used properly, I think it's a great tool. When you as a when your recruiting department at any university starts focusing on it too much,
yep,
and takes away from the fact that you are also expected to develop talent and find talent that are 17, 18 years old and bring them in, and the value of being able to teach them your system and how you want things done from a fundamental standpoint. When that starts getting overlooked, I feel like you're starting to lose the development of college football. And weirdly enough, I think that's going to be a ripple effect into the NFL even now, because
sure,
the NCAA has been the biggest feeder into college football. or into professional football. And now when you basically have another free agent cycle going along within your farm system, I think that's really tough. And it's going to be interesting to see the aftershocks of this year. And I think next year, probably for the next 4 to 5 years. But I think it'll ultimately all shake itself out. But I think, good for the kids taking a shot and betting on themselves. But I think the ones that actually have tape are probably better suited to find an opportunity than kids who don't. And that's the nature of the beast, unless you're a kid who's looking to go and shop down somewhere at the, group of 5, right, the 1AA level or something like that and go play. But ultimately, I think it's also going to distribute talent too. So, I think it'll all work itself out, but I think it's a good thing overall. But I think it's going to work itself out and it's going to present some challenges for the present.
Yeah, I mean, the talent distribution thing is really interesting to me because, we saw with Spencer Rattler going to South Carolina, like that's a, low middle SEC program, but he had a connection there and he'll definitely improve that program. Craig Young transferred out of Ohio State to Kansas. And so that's a very talented player that they probably had no shot at out of high school, and he's going to be there. That definitely becomes interesting. This conundrum of how you recruit now as a college program is really unique too. And I've talked to coaches about this, but there's this idea that you now experience an exodus of talent from your program, and you have high school recruits, but you're also able to bolster your program with guys who are physically ready to play football right now. Yeah. And so I think there needs to be an adjustment first off with the signing limits. Like, there's going to be an over-signing issue because there are going to be scholarships that are left open because you might have a bunch of guys transfer out and you can only sign so many. So that needs to be addressed as well. But like one coach I talked to, he said that his philosophy now is that he's going to have 7 spots every single year for transfer portal guys. That's his philosophy. He said 7 every single year. If it's more, he can do more. They
usually try to sign 25, right?
Right. And so
now, yeah.
Yeah. And so he's going to be signing in the high teens out of high school. And then, like I said, with the, guys leaving, talked to some other coaches who said, listen, we're going to sign 25 guys in a class or whatever, but we really need to have 33 guys come in or 34 guys come in just to replace what we lost. That becomes a really unique situation too. So I'm curious to see how this balances out. And I think this and NIL are similar in the fact that the novelty of it makes it so hard to judge, but there's going to come a point where players, coaches, businesses, whoever's involved on either side of it start to understand like, okay, maybe the way that we jumped at it at first isn't the way that we need to handle it in the long run. There are going to be some players, there are going to be the stories of guys who go in the portal and they disappear, which means that they're never playing ball again. And they're also not getting an education paid for. And that's a really tough pill to swallow. And so as we see that happen 2, 3, 4 years in a row, a lot of guys who would have just initially jumped from a program because they weren't in a situation that they thought was favorable might say, okay, let me stick this out for another year just to see if something might break. And that could be the year for them.
Yeah, I think that's very valuable. And then, the other thing is, I think it's going to be interesting too, because going back to just the talent distribution, I think it'll be really good because I think this is going to bolster a lot of, like I said, 1AA programs, because as kids start realizing that, and it's always hard too, because again, going back to coaching high school football, you hear all these kids now and they're like, oh, it's like Division I or bust, right? But when you look at NFL rosters, there's so many guys from so many different, everywhere. They're from everywhere. I mean, different levels, Division III all the way up. And when you sit there and you look at that, I mean, there's guys that never played a snap of college football that are on NFL rosters right now, Right. And when you look at that, I just hope that this whole thing opens it up and really makes those 1AA levels a little bit more competitive and a little bit deeper, and then feeds down all the way to the Division III level, because I really think it will. And when kids start seeing that opportunity and the ability to go and just play, like that's ultimately what it comes down to, is you need to go play. If you're not playing football, you're losing ground. But as long as you're playing football, meaningful snaps, you're giving yourself a chance. And a lot of these kids in the transfer portal, I hope they're not trying to go from Ohio State to Oregon and play, or from Oregon to USC and play.
Right.
I hope a lot of these kids, especially if you're not a starter, if you weren't a starter at one point or played a lot of significant snaps, if you've been a backup your entire time,
Right.
dude, go find a situation where you can step in and from day one play.
Yes.
And make an impact and get those valuable reps. Quarterback position all the way down to anything else. I think it's huge. So I think that's going to create a unique thing specifically for those lower levels in terms of how they focus on recruiting as well. You know, I think it'd be cool to see some of those smaller conferences, the ODUs, the Troys of the world, maybe saying, hey, you know, let's focus on maybe signing 8 or 9, maybe even 10 transfer portal guys, and letting the kids that we have who we may try and pluck from a JMU or not even a JMU, but like, let's say a Maryland or a Rutgers, let them go to Rutgers and figure it out. Right. Let them go get developed. And I think it'll kind of distribute it and work itself out, which I think will be great for college football as a whole.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. It's really interesting perspective there. Want to transition on to one final topic for our big thoughts. Manny Diaz to Penn State. How do you feel?
Yeah, I think that's a really good hire.
Yeah.
You have a guy who's had, you know, 7 years as a defensive coordinator and then 3 years as a head football coach. He's, like we've talked about, he's stepping into a unit that has a ton of talent. Even though they're losing some, still a very deep unit. And I'll be interested to see how they buy into him. But I think keeping Dex up there was huge as well. Not, you know, him not going to Virginia was big. Anthony Poindexter.
Yep.
And I think that as long as he assimilates well and comes in and gets the guys to buy in, I think it's a great hire. And really happy with how that worked out.
Yeah, splash hire. Absolutely. Yeah. He was a hot coordinator before he became a head coach. He's got the proven track record. I think he's going to fit right on in. And you mentioned it. It's not like he's got a ton of work to do in terms of recruiting guys and trying to implement and develop and everything else. There's a lot of guys ready to play at Penn State. Yeah. I thought it was the solid point of the team the whole year. So this is going to be, I think it's going to be pretty good.
Yeah. And even if it is a stepping stone thing for him, I think, you know, just speaking for Manny Diaz personally, and I don't want to do that and go out on a limb, but I think this will be a really good thing for him to get back to the basics after a tough run. I think a lot of guys view it that way, and specifically for him, I think he's going to come into it a little bit energized, rejuvenated, being able to just focus on defense and really, really hammer home, you know, his foundational thought processes and instill that in the unit. I think he'll come in rejuvenated, juiced up for the opportunity, and I think it'll be really good for him in his career path, wherever that leads.
Yeah, no, it's a great reset for him. I definitely agree with that point. Segment 3, we're going to look at some bowl games here, and we've got time to get into the playoffs in a later episode. We'll talk about the New Year's Six with Ohio State and Michigan State there as well. But I wanted to see what interests you from some of the other bowl games. Now, we're going to play a little game along with this. I'm going to read you the name of the bowl game. I was going to ask you, what does the company do? I might ask you for a couple of these, but what city is the bowl game played in will be the game that we play. So starting off with the VRBO Citrus Bowl, we've got number 15 Iowa versus number 22 Kentucky. Where is the Citrus Bowl played?
Is that in Orlando? It's in Florida.
That is in Orlando, Florida.
Yeah.
Camping World Stadium. Just a quick hit on this. This game it's lightly interesting to me simply because Iowa, like, you know, they are who they are. Kentucky was the hot team. You got one of the Stoops brothers there, and they all got connections to Iowa. So there's probably going to be some emotions involved for him. And then you've got Will Levis for Kentucky, who played in the Big Ten once upon a time.
Yep.
But I mean, do they have enough defense is the question.
Yeah, and I think that is the question. You know, it's always unique previewing bowl games because you have so much time to prepare.
Right.
There's a lot of elements that go into it. You know, Iowa had some guys banged up.
Yep.
Give them a chance to get healthy. I still feel like offensively, even at the beginning of the year, we had our questions about it, and I don't think they have enough firepower offensively. And I still think their defense has some holes. Even though they're sound, they're dealing with another element, some SEC speed. I like Kentucky in this one. It hurts me to say it, but just as a Big Ten guy, but I do think Kentucky is a good football team. I think they have a lot of things going for them. I think Will's played really, really well. I'm happy for him and what he's done down there. And I just don't know if Iowa can control the game the way that they need to be able to play it by their brand of football.
That is 100% the analysis on that football game. We got the Outback Bowl. That is Penn State versus number 21 Arkansas. Where's the Outback Bowl played?
It's not in Vegas. That's in Florida too, right?
Yeah, somewhere. City.
Let's go Tampa.
It's Tampa, Florida, Raymond James Stadium.
There we go.
So it's always unique when you're looking at a team who probably underachieved expectation-wise heading into a bowl game, because they could completely check out during the bowl process, or they could say, all right, we're going to end this one off on the right foot. They've had some turnover on the staff, but they also had some really good news that their quarterback is going to be back for another year, which is awesome. What do you see from this one?
Yeah, I think defensively, Penn State's going to match up really well with Arkansas. I've been very impressed with Arkansas. I love Pittman and his brand of football.
Me too.
It's a very physical, old school brand of football. But ultimately, what I'm going to pin this on is this is going to be on Clifford's shoulders here.
Yeah.
I don't think they're going to be able to run the football. They haven't been able to do it all year. Prove me wrong. Please prove me wrong. But I don't think that they're going to be able to run the football. But I will say, I think Yurcich, giving him some time and his propensity to create some unique schemes to prepare for, even though he's put some stuff on tape, I still think he does have some gadgety shit for this year that I think he's kept in the back pocket that he could bring out. I think this is going to be a damn good football game. I think it's going to be an old school slugfest type game, and I think for Penn State to pull it off, it's going to ride on 14 shoulders. But I think they could do it, and I think it's going to be I'm not going to say who's going to win this one, but I think it's going to be a fun one to watch.
I agree with you. I agree with you on the analysis of Penn State. I think for them, it's going to be Sean Clifford. Obviously, he's been the offensive engine for them when they've played really well offensively. He's played really well and done a good job of distributing the football. Defensively, I just love the way that the guys are put together. I like the way that they play ball. For Arkansas, again, it was another team that was off to a really hot start. They were a top 10 team in the nation at one point. Sam Pittman is a great coach. He's also a really fun personality to follow as well. He looks like he belongs in like a barbecue pit somewhere, just kicking back, drinking beers. So this will be a definitely a good game. This one's an easy one. The SRS distribution Las Vegas Bowl, played in Las Vegas. You got Wisconsin and Arizona State here. What are your thoughts?
See, I haven't watched much Arizona State. Don't stay up late enough for that.
Yep.
But, Wisconsin team, I think they felt like they let things slip. Give them a chance to get healthy. They're going to be able to run the football against anybody. I think Arizona State's built like most typical Pac-12 teams for the fast pace, get everything up and rolling.
Yeah.
You keep the ball out of their hands, I think you got a really good shot. Control the time of possession. Don't put Graham in compromising situations.
Yeah.
And really rely on those big guys up front to move the football 3 yards in a cloud of dust and keep the chains moving. I think Iowa's a physical team. I'm not sure what's going on at Arizona State too, from a coaching staff standpoint. I'm not sure, Brenneman, who I played with at Penn State, was up there. He got himself in some trouble, and not really sure what's going on up there. So I think this is a great opportunity for Wisconsin to end the season on a high note and head into the winter and spring with a bowl victory into their hands. So I like Wisconsin this one. I'm gonna go with the Badgers.
Yeah, I'm looking at Graham Mertz specifically in this football game because he's had some moments that have been very good. He's also had some moments that have been piss poor. And if this gets in a situation where they have to throw the ball like we saw in Wisconsin's final game of the season. I'm curious to see if the concentration and the slow it down, teach tempo development process of bowl practice would have helped him in that situation. Transperfect Music City Bowl, Purdue versus Tennessee. What city?
It's got to be Nash Vegas.
It's Nashville. That's right. So Tennessee, I've got a friend who's on the beat down there, and she's talked about Hendon Hooker, the quarterback down there, as a player that has really surprised in terms of his development. When you look at Purdue, I think that they have been very solid defensively. If they're going up against a quarterback who's pretty good, I want to see that matchup just in terms of how far they have really come. But for me, this Purdue offense and the explosion that they have shown at times is really the story.
I think that's going to be key. I think Aiden O'Connell, him coming back for a 6th year, massive. I think him having an opportunity to play well will be big. I'm hesitant to rely on Purdue just because of the ups and downs. They are a giant slayer. I think Tennessee's a very good football team. They've shown a lot. I think they're a good football team that's on the rise. I'm really intrigued to see the trajectory of this program coming off of this year. They've played some heavyweights themselves and given them some challenges. Tennessee, it's pretty much an in-state game. They got to go 2.5, 3 hours to get to Nashville. I think it's going to be tough for Purdue to come down there and take this one, but I'm hopeful. And like I said, I think it's going to your point, it's going to rely heavily on how well they do offensively and can Aiden keep them in the football game and play exceptionally well.
Definitely. New era Pinstripe Bowl, Maryland versus the Fighting Brent Pryce, Virginia Tech. Mm-hmm. What city?
No, it's New York, baby.
New York
it's the MVP
City.
Of that game.
There you go. All right, so let's get some quick thoughts. So for Maryland, that's a team that was banged up throughout the season. They lost some guys that will not return for this game, but I think they can get some guys back. Offensively, when Leah is playing his best football, they are a very dangerous offense. Defensively, they're just not very good. I don't know a lot about what Virginia Tech is working with in terms of their offense, but if they are explosive in any type of fashion, this could be a dangerous one for Maryland.
Yeah, I don't know how explosive Virginia Tech is. I think they're proficient enough to present some challenges. But I think you hit the nail on the head. If they can get healthy offensively, this one can be a shootout. I think it can be fun to watch. It's just hard for me to give any ACC team a ton of credit right now because of the way that whole season played out for them down there. No one wanted to win it. No one wanted to, do anything really, except for Kenny Pickett. So I don't know. I mean, I think this has shootout potential. But we'll find out. Is Brent coaching this game? Do you know that?
I would assume. I think a lot of these guys are stepping right on in. I have no idea though.
That'd be interesting to see. I'm not quite sure. Because if it is, you got a guy who's got familiarity, which definitely throws a monkey wrench in the old operation for Maryland. So I think that'll be interesting. I think that's something to watch. If Brent's coaching this game and he's got really 3-4 weeks to get a defense rolling and he can basically replicate a couple game plans, it could present some issues. So I think that's something to watch.
Definitely will be something to watch. And then finally, the Guaranteed Rate Bowl. It's Minnesota versus West Virginia. I got 2 questions on this one. First off, where is the game played?
Guaranteed rate. Let's go Birmingham, Alabama.
Good guess. Phoenix, Arizona.
Okay.
And then what does Guaranteed Rate do?
It's got to be some type of like mortgage loan thing.
Mortgage lender.
Yeah.
All right. So for Minnesota, they got Kirk Shiraka back, and he will be coaching in this game. And Tanner Morgan played his best football when he was coached by Kirk Shiraka. So that'll be something I am 100% looking out for in that game. That's pretty much the only thing.
Yeah. I mean, I think the one thing that we always talk about too is Minnesota's ability up front to dictate the game. I think those linemen are going to be heavily relied on. I think it's very similar to Wisconsin's approach with a team that played in a conference that relies on offense heavily, is keep the ball out of their hands. And if they can run the football and limit opportunities, I think Minnesota's got a really good chance here.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that. And that will do it for this episode of the JP and Hack Show, part of the Field of 12 Media Network, Season 1, Episode 17, presented by our partners over at Bet River Sportsbook, Joshua Perry, Christian Hackenberg. We will be back next time. We'll examine in depth the playoff, the New Year's Six bowl games, maybe get into a little bit more discussion on whatever crazy news is happening. But as always, it was a pleasure.